Yama all you mob out there, and I hope you're all keeping safe and well during these times. And I'd like to now introduce you to Darkinjung Ngura. This is our third episode, and we're out here at Mt Yengo. As you can see, one of the most significant sites, and here in Wollombi Valley, where the 7 language groups came together here at this sacred mountain, at this sacred place. Yengo was considered one of the oldest religious sites on the east coast of Australia. It represents the story of the great Bayami coming down from the morning star, stepping on the flat top mountain as such. You can also see the shoulders of Mt Yengo too on the sides of it. But this is where a lot of First Nations groups said that life itself started. So you're looking at the, what do they call it, the Garden of Eden, I think. And so this is our Garden of Eden. And I'm from the Gomeroi people, and straight through the valley here into the northwest, into the lower Hunter Valley, up into the northwestern New South Wales is Gomeroi country. To the south of here is Wiradjuri country. Then you have the Gadigal people's lands, which is over the Dirrabin, which is the Hawkesbury River. Then we have the Darkinjung people, which is virtually here, right in country too, down to the coastline, and the Awabakal people, and also the Warramai people and the Wonnarua, which is in the lower part near Singleton of the Hunter Valley. So those people, or the groups, were the 7 language groups that gathered here. One of the most significant sites here, across from Yengo, which was used extensively for thousands of years, especially with rituals and ceremony as such, is called Mount Finchley. We're standing here on Mount Finchley, Trig, and it's a really high point here. As you can see, there's, you can see just about 360 all around you because it's so high at this Trig point. Early Europeans came through these areas, especially with the Great North Walk, also came, or the Great North Road as such, came up into areas like Wollombi in the early days. One of the first access that early Europeans went through was in the lower part of the Hunter Valley, places like Maitland, Singleton, Scone, Murrurundi, Muswellbrook, all these towns that exist today there. And naturally, Aboriginal people met people especially in Gadigal country as such, and led them to the inland areas like this. And there was an actual Mitchell, who was an explorer, who went up into the northwest area, into Gomeroi country in the early days. He took a young Aboriginal person with him, and I think he was from the Gadigal people's land as such. And when he got so far here in the Wattican Ranges, he looked into the northwest and he said, "I'm not going any further. That's all Gomeroi country." And they were, considered hostile, as Aboriginal people would also, note that Gomeroi people were very, they say, defensive about their country and what people enter it. And so he wouldn't go any further, and which Mitchell did with his party, and he was met with 1,000 warriors armed to the teeth on the Guida River up near Moree. And he said one old man came out of the group and said in English, "Go home, white man," and which I guess freaked Mitchell out and his party to come this far, 800 k's inland, and to be told to go home in the King's English. And Europeans had never ventured anywhere in inland New South Wales at that time. So it tells you that Aboriginal people, in regards to the Black Line, spreading through Aboriginal nation groups about, I guess, strangers coming into people's lands as such, in the arrival of the first fleet. It spread through Aboriginal nation groups very, very quickly, to the point where, Europeans were witnessing Aboriginal people talking English when they'd never learnt English in their lives. So they've picked it up very early, and I'd say they picked it up around the Awabakal people, the Darkinjung people, or the Gadigal people, because those were the nation groups that took the first brunt of colonisation as such. today Mt Yengo sits as a very special place for those Aboriginal groups, and it was given back around, I'm saying around 15 years ago when Mt Yengo was handed back. I attended that day here of the handback, but it was actually secured by national parks. They bought the mountain itself and the land surrounding the mountain. It was a bit of a hollow handback celebration as such, because it really didn't give anything back to Aboriginal people. It was just national parks had stepped in and had brought the land and brought the mountain itself. They say on behalf of Aboriginal people, but it's still controlled by national parks today. So where's the true ownership here in regards to special sacred sites like Mt Yengo, which our people have been coming here for generations and generations. The story of Bayami, coming from the morning star as such, and you can see in this place, especially here at Mount Finchley, in regards to if you were standing here at night time, the whole sky is just full, with the star world naturally, when you could almost touch it, just billions of stars. We're here at this time in the middle of May, which is the right time for the Dinawan to appear in the eastern sky world. And that happens every year, and that also triggers another event which happens in the environment, where the whales start to leave Antarctica in the south and travel up the east coast to the warmer waters, and where mothers would give birth to their babies. A lot of these were associated with Aboriginal ceremony too, because Aboriginal culture was so spiritually, physically, religiously tied to the land. So what events that happened in the environment were celebrated by human beings too at the same time, like the whale migrations as such. That would start off celebrations right through Aboriginal nation groups, and different events right through the year where different ceremonies would happen at different times. In the story of Bayami coming here or landing here, he basically came from a place they call Ngura, which means home or place as such. We also say Ngura for country, and that is shown in engravings and also on rock paintings as such, and passed on by Aboriginal word of mouth as such about the creation story of Bayami and Yi coming from our Ngura in the Mirrabooka. Mirror means stars and Booka means river, so they call the Milky Way the river of life. And our people interpret Bayami as his vehicle, coming through the Milky Way or the river of life in a canoe. And that's the way our people interpret Bayami's vehicle at a very famous rock engraving site down on the Central Coast. And so he has two kangaroos, which is the tucker that he brought with him in his canoe, and his wife Yi and their three daughters. They landed here at the sacred mountain. Now, after creation as such, or after their arrival, they walked across the land. This is where they awoken the spirit of Ngura, which is the Rainbow Serpent, and that's pretty universal right through Aboriginal nation groups all over Australia, and about the movement of the land. And Ngura moved with the land. Ngura carved out the mountains, the rivers, the valleys, the water holes. Ngura interacted with not just animals and plants, but also in some cases with human beings or tribes, because some tribes have Ngura associated with those interactions with the people themselves. So before human beings existed, and when human beings were here, that Ngura was here on the earth, the Rainbow Serpent. And Ngura is also associated with water. There's a lot of symbolism around the Rainbow Serpent and water with the land. Ngura went back into the land, and at different places and different nation groups where Ngura had settled and rested after creation, they became very sacred and special places that weren't allowed to be disturbed at all. And the interactions between our what I call our ancestral beings, which is the environment, the plants, the animals, the birds and everything else, became the mountains, the water holes, the rivers, the creeks, women's grounds, men's grounds. They all appeared or started to appear at this time in creation as such. And this was for, or laying a platform of life for the future of human beings here on the earth, which was us. And so Bayami and Yi in the story walked the land, and wherever they walked, they left their mandois, which it means footprint in language. They left their mandois all over the place. And at Mount Finchley engraving site, which is not far from here, you'll see that a lot of these engravings represent spirit beings as such, spirit beings that relate to good spirits, bad spirits, happy spirits, godly figures as such in the engraving or in the sandstone rock where they've been engraved. These were important ceremonial places. Mount Finchley engraving site is a very, very old ceremonial ground. There's another ground here they call the Barragara, which is more of a men's site, and which men can only go to that site naturally because it's a ceremonial site that relates to men's business there. Wollombi was considered the woman's ground, and where the women would hold their camp as such when the Barragara ceremony was on. So different nation groups would traverse or walk here from hundreds of miles just to come to this place every 5 to 6 years or so. And so the Darkinjung would host these people, and it was well recorded by Matthews, who sat at the Barragara, who was invited at that time as one of the first Europeans to sit at a ceremony as such like that, and he recorded it really in detail. And so that's was amazing for that time and for elders and Aboriginal people to allow him to sit at such a ceremony. So Yengo, I guess it's something that is very special to all Aboriginal nation groups all over Australia. I've talked to other Aboriginal nation groups, even from Central Desert and other places. They heard of Mt Yengo. So when you look at the environment and when the oceans flooded the inlands of Australia, it was a very different place 50-odd thousand years ago. You could probably get in a canoe from places like here and row all the way to the middle of Australia because the ocean flooded the whole land. So people moved about much more frequently with the ocean flooding the continent. And then naturally over time the ocean receded, fell back to where we now see it today and where it rests. But these places remain in First Nation groups' folklore and story. Old people have been told about this place at Mt Yengo and of its existence. You might relate this to another place in Central Desert called Uluru, which is the rock on the Central Desert mob there that relates to Mother, and where she rested after the creation and rested and became the rock, or the back of the Mother is the rock itself. And that's why they didn't like anyone walking on the rock, because it's disturbing the resting place of our creation Mother as such after the birth of the tribes. And the dingo spirit overlooks Uluru as the protector of that as such. So that's the meaning why. When we come to religious or special sites like this, naturally you would smoke yourself before you enter in these places as such, or engravings that you might come across is that way. We say that it's respect, and by cleansing yourself and cleansing the area as such, we are recognising and respecting the spirits of this land. And that's why we do the smoking ceremony as burning the green gum leaf. That is a cultural practice that it's done all over Australia. The green gum leaf is because naturally it is part of the earth, part of our Mother, and by immersing ourselves in the smoke when we fire it, is being physically and spiritually as one with our mother, and that's why we do it in that way. So these mountains, as you see around us too, you'll see certain peaks or mountains here in the northwest and in the western areas and southwest, that Bayami used these mountains as stepping stones after creation. So after everything was created here on the earth as such, they left here at Mt Yengo again, using the mountains as stepping stones, and stepped back up to the sky world. And so this mountain actually is where we believe as Aboriginal people of all life on earth originated from here. So if you're looking for the Garden of Eden, we're looking at it right now. This is what we see as our Garden of Eden, or all human life originated from this very spot. So when you look at religious nation groups all over the world, or different beliefs as such, Aboriginal people are 10 times, 20 times more older in their religious beliefs and cultural practices than any other nation group on earth. And Philip himself, when they landed here with the first fleet, he said, every time I ask an Aboriginal, where do you people come from? And our people were asking the same question. And he said, for some strange reason, they all just point to the eastern sky, because that's in the direction of how we say where Bayami arrived from, the eastern sky world, here at Mt Yengo. It has a lots of meaning in regards to the spiritual connection to our kingship structure. And the kingship structure was handed out at this very place here. The kingship structure is a system of family system that determines how we live with one another and with our environment, with our ancestral environment. And that really puts down or lays down the law of how we live here on earth as such. And it's something that is embedded in Aboriginal culture, like DNA is embedded in us. It's very much embedded in Aboriginal people. But I think this goes across all peoples of the world. And when you look at our kingship structure and system, it's the oldest system on earth, but it's embedded in every nation in the world itself. So these places are not just our stories as Aboriginal people, but they belong to everyone. They belong to everyone, these stories as such, and we should share them and tell people about these stories. But they're precious to our people, precious especially to our children, because you know, it's important that our children, especially from now we're being a colonised nations as such, with the arrival of Europeans, really disconnected and really interrupted Aboriginal way of life, and really turned it up on its head, really, because language wasn't spoken, dances weren't being danced, stories weren't being passed down, and so that did a lot of damage there. But when you look at places like this, you know, it really makes you think that, you know, through that damage too, that we still have a lot here, and naturally that's through our Ngura, through our land. So Yengo itself means to step up as such into the sky world. That's what Yengo means. And I think if more and more people learn and about especially places like Mt Yengo, especially for a young colonised country like Australia as such today, that a lot of non-Indigenous people just don't know the spirituality of Aboriginal culture, and they're so special and so strong. You know, when they understand that a lot more, then they understand Aboriginal people a lot better.